Ladies and gentlefish, 3 rounds remain in this Formula One season, which is just crazy to me since I swear the season just started. What do you mean it's already leaving? Well, maybe that's because the first half of the season, more like 60% of it, was pure nonsense that was honestly offensive to even watch. These races like the one in China or Saudi or Miami or Monaco or Spain or Austria or Spa were so unbelievably bad that for me at least, they just blended into one. All of those races I mentioned and a couple of others are just one race in my head since they don't stand out apart from the fact that it was a McLaren winning with virtually no competition. This obviously sucks and isn't what I would call good racing or just good, but it hasn't been like this all season. And in fact, recently it has been so good. Sure, the racing isn't the best still, but man, the drivers are making up for it with their stupidity. And yeah, there's likely an issue with that, but I don't really care. After the boring nothing of this season, I don't mind the drivers getting a bit wacky and out of order. Plus, what a time since the Drivers' Championship still hasn't wrapped up, and despite a 20-point lead in the standings, who's to say Norris can't suffer in DNF still? First time was so nice, I had to do it twice. So I thought, since I made 3 videos before predicting how certain people or teams can win the title, why don't I make one final definitive video predicting how this season will end? Where the previously mentioned videos usually had to have an element of bullshit. I mean, I literally said Lewis would nuke half the field in Monza. I gotta be real for this one, because let's be frank, the cards for this season have fallen into place. It will either be Lando taking home the title after a champion's form in the last half of the season. It will either be Piastri taking home the title since all he needs is one bad Norris race to still be in it. That's if Piastri decides to be good again. Or it will either be Verstappen taking the title after letting his competition kill itself. This, in my eyes, makes the season end pretty unpredictable, and even if I don't get it right, man, let me think and have some fun. These videos are my favorite to make since it's really just bullshit half the time, but I like to think of it more as headcanon being shared instead of some maid using her magic ball to see the future. Plus guys, when have I ever been wrong with my predictions? It's not like every single one of them I do leads to the hardest jinx known to mankind, so please. So go join the Discord to share your predictions and subscribe if you're new if you're scared for LN1. So enough yapping and let's get to quacking.
A good weather for a race, but especially for a duck.
So there are 3 rounds remaining, all with an equal chance to stir up some chaos. Such is the nature of Vegas, this race weekend is a gamble for most teams since they'll either do good or fucking explode. Qatar, while it may be vomit reincarnated into a racetrack, is a sprint weekend and the tires love to get ripped to shreds here. And while Abu Dhabi is vomit mixed with diarrhea and a pinch of rotting flesh, 2021 is all I will say. So like an album, let's start with the first on the list, Las Vegas. Now, I don't mean to brag, but I am going to this one in person. Seriously, I'm not bragging, the tickets were not kind. And since I am going to be mere yards away from the drivers, let's just say some of them will feel the effects of my manifestation and jinxing prowess. I think the weekend will start swimmingly with nothing much being shown in practice. Really, everybody's predictions that McLaren will not do good here would seem to come true since for FP1 and FP2, their highest placement will be 4th. And while FP3 did see them 2nd, they were running a different program to everybody else and it isn't really representative. As for the other teams, it's also as expected with one exception. Red Bull look fine here, like if they could set the car up right and not suck donkey dick like in Brazil, they could do good and maybe with the right conditions, win. However, don't count on it since even in a year like 2023, that win was very difficult. Mercedes also look right on track with everyone else since while FP1 and FP3 may see them close to the pack, and FP2 under conditions similar of that of race day, they will seemingly be in another league of their own. Mercedes love the cold very much, so I guess this shouldn't be surprising. However, despite that, Kimi would show great pace so far, which could maybe lead to a heated race for Merc. Anyways, the real wild card this weekend will be Ferrari, since while yes, any result would be better than no result, look at Brazil for justification, Ferrari would kind of perform out of their league this week. We know Charles loves this track, and Lewis last year went from like what, P10 to P2? The drivers clearly love the track, and as for the car, it looks alive, which is weird since given the complicated-ish nature of the track and the car's rear suspension being a McLaren fan, Vegas is a gamble and Ferrari have gone the jackpot this week. So we virtually have 4 teams vying for the win. Hell yes. So heading into qualifying, I would say the running order is Mercedes as the fastest from Ferrari and from both McLaren and Red Bull, who will need to equally rely on their drivers should they get a decent result. So let's begin with Q1 now, and nothing shocking would happen, or I guess maybe there was something since Yuki Tsunoda is safely through. Yikes. That will end in Q2, however, since he would qualify in 14th, and despite Ferrari executing their final runs poorly, they would barely scrape through after Gabby failed to knock Lewis out. So Q3 time, 4 teams all going for pole position, and in my brutal, honest opinion, Max Verstappen will take the pole position for this one. I think this because Red Bull, in a desperate effort to find performance everywhere they can, would essentially be running a brick through the turns, but a goddamn spaceship on the straights, and with Max being very good, he'll make up for that turn deficit and nab up pole position. The rest of the guys would be George in 2nd after leading most of the sessions, Charles in 3rd, Norris in 4th, Lewis in 5th, Kimi in 6th, and Pastry in not 7th, but 8th. Sorry, but I think Albon would be ahead. So now for the race, and this one would honestly be kind of disappointing. Like most of the season, qualifying would be the main highlight, since in the race, all I gotta say is dirty air and DRS train. George would try all he want, but he wouldn't be able to get past Max since he would either defend hard or blast away in the distance. So obviously Max would win this race pretty simply from George and Charles, who round out the podium, but Lewis behind will get up to 4th, while Norris drops down to not 5th, but 6th, since Kimi did show good pace despite a lackluster qualifying. Pastry is also able to get ahead of Alex for P7, probably on lap 1, so sorry there wasn't much to say in the race, but I don't know, I just get the vibes it'll be boring after all the hype people have surrounding this one. Oh well. But one we can actually think will live up to the hype will be Qatar, which I'll just spoil it right now, the title is decided here. Anyways, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Like last weekend, we have FP1 to go through, but unlike Vegas, that's it, since this one is our favorite, a sprint weekend. So FP1 begins and fuck all happens. It's FP1, man, you can't read into it too much since one team can perform really bad here but then fight for pole in the main qualifying, and that does seem to be the meta for Ferrari, for example, since they more or less treat the sprints as another practice session instead of a points format. So the general assumption in Qatar is that McLaren looks really strong, but so does Max, which can maybe lead to a close race. As for Mercedes, they look alright, like they aren't totally gone, but also not totally there if you catch my drift, and Ferrari were found dead in their hotel, so let's move on to sprint qualifying. SQ3 is nothing special other than maybe a good midfielder like Hadjar out, who cares. SQ2, however, both Ferraris get eliminated through honestly no fault of their own. Someone will either send it into the barriers or get beached on the gravel, bringing an abrupt end to the session. So poor Ferrari, but they weren't getting much anyway from the sprint. So now for SQ3, and pretty unsurprisingly, a McLaren is on pole, but not Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri gets this one, which maybe could see a bit of a return to form, and I would like to think it does, since for the sprint race, Oscar Piastri will run away with the win, but that doesn't mean this race was bad. While Oscar was blasting off in the distance, Norris would have to be fighting demons with Max, while the Ferraris cut their way through traffic, and of course the midfield battle will be exciting, all leading to a decent sprint race with the top 3 being Pastry, Lando, and Max. So now for the main qualifying, and Q1 and Q2 wouldn't be anything special or noteworthy since it would just be the typical midfield exits and surprises. However, for Q3, I think it'll be ultra tight, and the fight for pole will be extremely close between Pastry, Max, and Lando, with all of them qualifying in that respective order by, let's say, 1/10 from 1st to 3rd. And as for the other two, Merc are fine in like 4th and 6th, while Ferrari checkerboard with them in 5th and 7th. So now for the main race, and unlike every sprint weekend so far where the sprint race was honestly much better than the main one, Qatar would actually feature a great main race. Now I know Pirelli introduced a special rule for this weekend only that forces the teams to pit after every 25 laps, essentially guaranteeing a 2-stop, but unlike in Monaco where it failed, it will actually be super successful here. This track burns the rubber more than a cheating husband with a loving wife and kids at home, so this new tire rule could perhaps entice the drivers to race and actually use their tire knowing it's getting slapped off soon. So the race starts and Pastry gets off horribly from the line, which sees Max go into the lead first. However, Lando, who got a blitzing start, is able to get ahead of Max by the 2nd sector. Then we have an all-out duel between the top 3 for position, with them changing many times, and Red Bull opting for an alternative strategy that sees a slow middle stint but a hellish final stint that McLaren, despite their car advantage, cannot make up, which sees Max make a move for the lead in the final 5 laps and win this race from not Norris but Piastri, who despite running the same tire as Lando had more fresher ones and was able to get past him. So this leads us into the final race of the season. Norris is on 420 points, Piastri is on 398, and Max is on 397. Lando has a 23-point gap to Max and 22 gap to Piastri. If one of them is to still win the title, and they need luck now more than ever. So FP1 begins, and unfortunately for Max, it's not looking good. That Red Bull car does look great in the straights, but for the turns, they kinda suck, and this track has quite a few of them, so could he fix this issue? Let us find out. As for McLaren, they look alright, like they look like they could win, but it won't be easy is all I'll say. Mercedes are also kinda so-and-so, no one really cares, and Ferrari, they look good, great even. I didn't mention Ferrari like barely in Qatar simply because I think they'll just suck and won't have it. However, here in Abu Dhabi, they get the balance. They find it, and despite McLaren and Red Bull sorting out their troubles in FP2 and FP3, Ferrari still look like the car to beat. So let's just get straight into it. Q1 and Q2 sees nothing surprising. However, maybe Kimi gets on Q2, we'll see. But in Q3, the first runs has the order of Leclerc from Lando by 200ths, from Hamilton by 100th. It is so extremely tight, and for the final runs, let's just say, now I've become death, the destroyer of worlds. George Russell hits his car where Latifi hit his in 2021, bringing out a red flag right as Lando is forced to lift off from his double purple sector lap. Many drivers were able to get a time in before the crash, so the top 10 is exactly this. Charles is on pole from Max, and behind them, Lewis is in 3rd, Lawson is in 4th, Norris is in 5th, Gabby is in 6th, Piastri is in 7th, Russell is in 8th, Behrman is in 9th, and Hadjar is in 10th. So the race begins and Charles gets off well and starts dancing off in the distance while Max stays relatively close behind, clearly saving tires. Lewis then leads the next train from Norris, who is hunting him down, while Liam and Gabby hold up Oscar. The first and only stops happen now, and Max is starting to apply pressure to Charles, but he is holding on. Meanwhile, Lando gets the undercut on Lewis, making Lando, of course, champion if things continue. Piastri is also able to undercut Gabby, however, Lawson stays in his way. So in the final 10 laps, Max is now in the DRS to Charles and they are fighting, while Lando is only like 5 or 6 seconds away and catching every single lap. Piastri is also able to finally get ahead of Liam, who held him up for essentially all the race, but is too far back from Lewis in 4th to even think about it. And as we enter the final lap, Charles leads Max by 0.6 of a second, while Norris is 1.5 behind, begging for them to crash. And despite Max dive-bombing Charles and maybe pushing him off circuit, Charles goes by the book. He's done this dance with Max before, and in the second straight, he is able to use the DRS to power past around the outside of Max and come home to win his first race of the season at the final round of it. Max rounds out second from Lando in 3rd, who is within a second and would be crying about one more lap, but maybe not. With this result, the clouds cover the sun and blood starts to rain down as the dead rise from their graves. The dark timeline is now in effect. Lando Norris is your 2025 F1 World Champion. And despite having great form in the back half of the season, man, that early season, we ain't forgetting, man. If Lando could have a relatively squeaky clean year in 2026, then maybe the fandom would appreciate his title win. But for now, expect tears on Twitter is all I will say. Personally, I'm fine with this result since I always knew Lando was the faster and better driver, but I would be lying if I said that I was totally happy with this. Oh well, that's racing, I guess. Piastri in the race finishes in 5th after ironically being held up by Liam, who was the second Red Bull driver after all, which of course means despite Oscar performing really good initially and leading the title by a staggering 34 points at one point in time, he doesn't even finish second in the standings since Max finishes ahead of him by 7 points. My oh my. Overall, it would be a decent finale, and now we hibernate as F1 prepares for an all-new regulation period in 2026 where the grid could be massively shaken up. Will Lando have a chance to win the title again and Oscar have a chance to redeem himself? Will Red Bull under new leadership and a new partnership be able to give Max a title-winning car again? Will Mercedes really be as good as they hype themselves up to be, or will Ferrari in their silence debut a generational car? Who the hell knows, but let's see what the year has in store for us. Anyways, that was my prediction for how 2025 will end. Was it too dramatic? Maybe, but it was fun, man, don't lie. Plus, I tried to be as real as possible, and if this really does come true, or at least somewhat true, then what does that say about the predictability of F1? Who knows, but let's wait and see what this season still has left for us. Anyways, I want to give a quick shout out to all members of the flock for their continued support, and make sure to join it if you want cool benefits, as well as just helping me out. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe since it really helps me out. Make sure to let me know in the comments what your predictions are for the season. And as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for the duck.